Good morning, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen, reporting from my little cabin in the woods, Murphy's Law. And I'm so excited today. We have so many authors and writers here for our wonderful continuing second Saturday of the month Writers Club with the International Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys Book Club Reading Nation. Can you believe I got that all out without making a mistake? I do this totally off the cuff. Because we want to keep it as authentic and real as possible. But I'm just going to introduce everybody that we've got on board here this morning to Ruthie. I don't know if you know Carol Vandenhind. Is that pronounced correctly, Carol?
It's actually Carol Vandenhende. Hey, Ruthie, thanks for accepting my friend request on Facebook. Great to meet you.
Hey, and
So great to meet you.
And we're color coordinated, I think.
I know your background. Thank you.
Well, orchid is my favorite flower. And I have to say that color of that orchid on your book and what she has on is more my favorite color. The bubblegum pink I can't stand, but the fuchsia pink I love. So we're all here. Mandy Hayes is, of course, my executive director, is going to be helping us through this process. But I am going to introduce you to Ruthie Landis, who is a multiple Pulpwood Queen pick. She has done a lot with our book club, and everything that she does, including her last live online book club meeting with us, was so life transforming for me and affirming that I'm really looking forward to today, Ruthie. So I know you have something special planned. Let's hear all about it. I'm turning it over to you, and I'm going to make you the gallery speaker so we only see your face. Okay?
Oh, okay. That's great. I like seeing your faces. So, and I am gonna call on, like, if you have a question whenever I'm talking, please, if I'm yapping away, just raise your hand like this, and I will stop what I'm saying right there, and I will listen to you, because this is interactive, and I don't like the format of talking at people. I'm a relational talker. So please, at any time, raise your hand, ask me questions, okay? So I actually want to see if I can share my screen. We have had some technical difficulties this morning. So let's just see if I can do it. I'm going to try. Yay! It seems to work.
Yes.
And yay, it worked. Okay. And so I always love to begin anything by opening the heart. And I think that opening the heart, it always happens when we hear music. So I came upon this actually yesterday when we talk about the Enneagram. So the Enneagram, when I started working with it 25 years ago, nobody in the, nobody knew about it. And I mean, that's not true, nobody, but just a smattering of people. And in the last 25 years, it has just kind of burst. Now, it became very, very interesting in other countries, in Europe, in Asia, in South America, Argentina, but the United States was a little slow to catch up. It's an ancient model that's 2,000 years old. So, it's had a long time to catch up, I think, but it is brilliant. And yesterday I came upon this musician who had written the most exquisite songs about the Enneagram numbers. And so I am going to play the one which is the number 2. That is my number. So I'm going to be very revealing as I play this song, because it tells a lot about me. And I think, Mandy, if it's okay with you, you said that you had identified as a 2 as well. So I can't play all 9, but I do want to play this because it kind of gets to the heart of, or the soul of, each of these 9 Enneagram numbers. So here I go. You can see it, right? I'm going to click it, and I'm going to make the screen big. There it is. Sweetheart, you look a little tired. When did you last eat? Call me to make yourself right at home.
Stay as long as you need. Tell me something wrong, if something's wrong, you can come with me. You know, take my heart, clean apart if it helps yours beat. It's okay if you can't find the words. Let me take your coat and let's weight of your shoulders. Like a force to be reckoned with, a mighty ocean or a gentle kiss. I will love you with every single thing I have. Like a tidal wave, I'll make a mess. Calm waters if that serves you best. I will love you without any strings attached. It's okay if you can't catch your breath. You can take the oxygen straight out of my own chest. I know exactly how the road goes, put my mask on first. No, I don't wanna talk about myself, tell me where it is. I just wanna build you up till you're good as new. And maybe one day I'll get around to fixing myself too. I don't even know where to start. Already tired of trying to recall it all fell apart. I just wanna love you, to love you, to love you well. I just wanna learn how to somehow be like myself. Like a force to be reckoned with, a mighty ocean or a gentle kiss. I will love you without any strings attached. What a privilege it is to love, a great honor to hold you. Like a force to be reckoned with, a mighty ocean or a gentle kiss. I will love you with every single thing I have. Like a tidal wave, cold waters if that serves me best. I will love you without any strings attached. I will love you without a single string
Wow.
So you see, it's the name of this young man is Ryan O'Neill. He's only 37 years old. And the Enneagram is such a fragile, because it's so fragile model, because it's so true and so exposing. And so in the hands of less sensitive individuals, it can become a kind of typing system or box. But this young man, Ryan O'Neill, writes the most beautiful songs. And when I looked him up, he's kind of from around my area in Illinois. And he writes for Grey's Anatomy. He writes music for a lot of the series that are out there. And I was like, oh my God, I found this young man. And so what I want to say is, though, I will offer you lots of information, and I'm going to show you, my website right now, which was open and now it's closed. I'm going to get it open. If you go to this guy and on YouTube and you listen to all the numbers, you will get to the heart of all of these numbers, and you will get it from the heart. I mean, I listened to pretty much all of them last night and I wept. I wept because they were so true and yet generous, non judgmental. You know, a lot of times people, um, they don't, they close off to the Enneagram because they feel exposed, you know, and they feel a little judged. So, what I'm going to show you now is, well, first I'm going to tell you a story. So, the story that I'm going to begin with is my story and my relationship with the Enneagram and how it's affected my life in so many ways. So, 25 years ago, or yeah, about thereabouts, my best friend Joy, who was my mentor and my soul sister, I'm going to start to cry because I miss her so much. She died a year and a half ago. And she would keep shoving things at me, you know, like she wanted me to learn. And she'd say, "You got to do this." She was from North Carolina. And she gave me a book on the Enneagram, and I read it and I hated it. I was like, oh, this is so judgmental. I don't like any of these numbers. The descriptions of the numbers are awful. I will not identify with any of these numbers. And then she said, "Oh, well, I'm going to get you another book written by somebody else." So what I realized later was that the book she gave me was written by a certain number on the Enneagram. And their tendency is to talk about the problems they see. So of course I didn't like it. I didn't like it because I wasn't seeing it through my own eyes. So she kept giving me more books. And then finally, she gave me a real simple book that was very neutral. And I opened it up and I read it, and it was 2 years actually. And I said, "Oh my God, this is exactly what I need. This is exactly a map of the ego structure of myself and every character I've played as an actor and every character I've written. What am I doing? Why have I been so resistant to it?" And I realized it because it, some of the books were pretty judgy, you know, or felt like that to me. Not to the person writing it, but to me, they felt that way. So I kind of at that point, you know, was integrating the Enneagram into all my acting classes, master classes, writers classes, all kinds of stuff, and in with my private clients as well, for individual growth, for couples and families to have a vocabulary in which you understand where everybody is coming from, and you understand they can't help seeing the world through their glasses. They just can't help it. And you can begin to help it when you can speak a common vocabulary about it. And you can begin to help it when you say, "This isn't putting me in a box. This is describing the box I've already put myself into." There's a huge difference in that. Oh, you know, this is typecasting me. You know, with Kathy and Robert, you know, when we do the films, we're always talking about the roles of the characters, etc. And, you know, and then we've talked a lot about actors who are typecast. But, you know, um, we typecast ourselves. And it's all connected to the stories we tell ourselves and the way that we're perceiving the story we're living. And we don't have to perceive it that way. It's only one lens. And so it is this amazing gift to me. You know, so here I'm going to meet with you for maybe an hour and 45 minutes. And I have been studying this for 25 years and working with people for 25 years and using it myself in my own self growth and my relationships for 25 years. And I keep learning more and more every day. I it is a gift that is going to keep on giving probably to the end of my days. So, what am I talking about? So, first, I want to say if you want to know more about the Enneagram later, I have a YouTube channel, Ruthie Landis YouTube, and I have about 60 videos on that. And there's a lot of them on the Enneagram. And I'm starting a new series of videos called okay, I've identified myself as an Enneagram 2. Now, what do I do? Now, what? How do I use it? And the Enneagram is applicable in absolutely any setting. The Enneagram will even describe, besides an ego structure, it will describe a cultural structure. So imagine you're setting your novel in another world, and it describes the kind of personality of that world as well. So the United States of America is a 3, and when I kind of go around this circle, um, you're going to be able to understand what I'm talking about, but it's the performer achiever, the United States of America. We have to be the best at everything, right? And but other cultures aren't like that. And they also have a point of view. So it's so helpful for the writer, not only about character development, but I just do want to say as a backdrop that it also describes culture. It describes this in the United States, the South and the Midwest and the East Coast and the West Coast. And they all seem to have a kind of personality, you know, that is a kind of gestalt of of their view, worldview. So the Enneagram is, they think maybe about a couple thousand years old. And they think that it dates back in principle, wasn't called the Enneagram. The word Enneagram just means Ennea is 9, and gram means drawing. So it just means drawing of 9, and you see it. And you see very importantly that it's a circle, right? So a circle indicates that the world could not live without any one of these numbers. It could not be whole. And the way I work with it is when I'm working with clients on their own self development, I say, you know, you're kind of living your life as a 2, but look at all of these other numbers available to you. Look at all of these other points of view. And you're stuck in a story right now. And if you think of your story that you're stuck in from a different numbers lens, you're going to get unstuck. You're going to see things differently. So that's why, you know, the novel that I'm working on, that Mandy, I had my first coaching session with Mandy. I just knew I had to reach out to her, that she would be kind and insightful and supportive of me. And she was that times 10. And, you know, I was trying to search for the narrative voice of this novel, and the novel is a kind of web of points of view. It's a web of these 9 different numbers embodied in people. And I was trying to decide, do I do an omniscient narrator? Do I do semi-omniscient? What do I do? And Mandy said, I think you have to write each chapter from a first person, from the point of, you know, drop into their point of view. And we know Faulkner's As I Lie Dying is a perfect example of every chapter is written from the point of view of someone in the community, and the story unfolds through these different lenses, right? So I just, yay, I'm doing that with the novel, and it's really exciting. So what I'm going to do is so I just said to you, I've studied it 25 years. And now in a few minutes, I'm going to try to distill the Enneagram. Okay? Praying, drop down, insight from above. Okay? So the Enneagram is divided into 3 centers of intelligence. Now, before I even say that, I want you to see that on the diagram, there are arrows. Do you see that? Can you see the arrows on the image? So what those arrows are is saying that nobody sees the world just one way in one situation. So these arrows point to places that these numbers go to when they're in stress or when they're in self-development. So nobody is stuck. And so they have, so like looking at the 2, which I have identified with, you see that next door I have 1 and I have 3. So they call those the wings, which means those sensibilities are a part of me. Some of them are underdeveloped, some of them are overdeveloped, but they're there too. And then where the arrow goes 2 to 8 and then 2 to 4. And those are there because they're to give the number balance in the way they come to the world. And when I talk about dividing these into these 3 different centers and stuff, you're going to see what I mean. I also want to say, you already are doing this. You are already wonderful, amazing writers. And you already know how to write a character that is true. You already know it. But what the Enneagram does is it keeps you on the map. You know, when you've read a story and you feel for a minute that this character isn't true to themselves, somehow they're doing something, and you say to yourself, I don't think this character would ever do this. I don't think so. Well, the Enneagram leads you back to, you're right, that character would never do that unless they were consciously evolving, or unless the situation forced them to evolve. But if you're reading a character and it's like, you know, when you hear in a musical score a clinker, you know, something that feels off, the Enneagram leads you back to the truth of the character. So we're going to start with 3 centers of intelligence. Because I'm a heart type, we're going to start with the heart types. So the heart types are the 2, 3, and 4. Again, you see they have arrows. They're not stuck there. So I'm going to start with the 2. So the heart types have an association with shame and worth. So it's really weird because these numbers don't walk around looking like they're ashamed or like they have no worth. They don't do that. Who would want to show that, right? So we hide it. We hide it behind a mask, and we hide it behind strategies. And you can see how this is important for your character, because your character not only, you know, has moments of speaking their truth, but they also wear masks just like we do, right? And they have certain behaviors and strategies that they use. So the heart types are like, I don't want everybody to know that. And you're kind of born with this. I really believe, yes, it's this nature and nurture thing, but it's definitely nature first. There may come a time when they genetically will prove that you are born a particular number on the Enneagram. And then what do? You come to your life and your package and your family with this lens already. And then you're going to do confirmation bias, and you're going to see the world through that lens and prove you're right about your own story and about yourself until you don't, until you wake up. And so I think it's innate. I think that's why even twins can have a different perception of their family, right? Certainly siblings do. So what happens in the heart types is we don't want to walk around as heart types looking like we're unworthy. So we find a strategy and a mask that hides it. But we're always seeking intentionally, and you know, intention is everything for a character. We're always seeking intentionally that which we're hiding. So for the heart types, we're seeking our worth in whatever form we decide to do that in. So the song I played was a 2. How, let me ask you, having listened to the song, what does the 2 looking for? What in that song that I played, what are they looking for, and what was their strategy? Could you tell? Could anybody say? Please feel free to unmute yourself.
I don't think if I had that question before I listened,
Yes.
I think I would be able to answer better.
Okay, that's helpful to me. So I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to see if that lines up to how you heard the song.
I got a lot of caring and generosity out
Yes,
of the song.
yes, right. So the strategy for the 2 is I'm going to find my worth by thinking about everybody else but myself.
Mm-hmm.
And my strategy to get worth is I'm going to be needed, because worth has everything to do about love. I'm going to love like nobody loves. I mean, that one line when he said, I'll give you the breath out of my own chest. I mean, that seems awful extreme, but that's what 2s are like. They're not thinking of the me. And we in our society go, oh, that's such a nice thing. But it's not healthy. It's a strategy, and it's false, because as he says at the end of the song, I have to work on myself. I have to love myself first. So that's the growth trajectory. So if you imagine a 2 in a novel or a story or a film, their character arc is to stop looking outside of themselves for affirmation and for a sense of their worth, and to turn their attention to themselves and accurately assess themselves and not give everything away. And that's why the 2 has to develop and use that 4. When I get to the 4 and the 3, you're going to see why they have access to those numbers, because it is their character's arc to not stay in the excess of their fixation about what they think will solve their secret, but in fact, to wake up out of that and to give themselves choices. And isn't that what we're doing in character development, right? We're trying to make a character stop their habitual behavior and wake up to other possibilities. And that's how they're really victorious at the end of a story, right? Not that they have the same point of view they did at the beginning of the story, but that they've grown somehow. So the 2 gives and it gives and it gives, and it's externally referencing and hurt to the core when somebody criticizes them. And why don't people love me as much as I love them? And I'm the wind under everybody else's wings, but I'm not the wind under my own wings. And when am I going to do that? And when am I going to move forward? When am I going to let myself be seen, have the courage to let myself be seen? And I can only do that if I love myself. And so the practice for the two, and if you're writing a character and developing them, is the journey of self-love. So now we move to the three. So the three is, so the two is kind of, they have lots of different names. I don't want to reduce these numbers to one name or label. It just doesn't feel right to me. But the two is called often the giver, the lover. We notice that Kathy says that a lot. Kathy says, I look for the givers. And that's important to her. So whether that's your innate number, Kathy, or whether it's one of your access numbers, that's important to you. That's in your value system. And of course, this is talking about the values of the characters you're writing, isn't it? So we move to the three, and the three says, well, I'm going to keep my secret about my sense of unworthiness and lack of value, and it's my secret. Nobody knows it, but I'm going to do it by being the best at everything I do. And I am going to, that's why, the United States of America, we have to win all the Olympic championships. And it's to prove worth, right? I mean, you wouldn't have to make such a big deal about it if you already were, feeling good about yourself. So it's a cover up, right? So the three has to be the best. They have to achieve. They're called the performer achiever. They have to achieve. They work their butts off. And they put so much on their plate, and they distract from themselves because they're going, well, if I'm the best and I'm number one, then I must have a sense of worth, right? And often you'll see in a story the three kind of being an antagonist sometimes, because the three, in trying to be the best all the time, you never stop trying to prove yourself. And so there's no respite. There's no place to rest. And you distract and you self-deceive. So they'll sometimes associate, like with the two, they'll associate with the word pride. You'd say, well, why? The two is so humble. It's the opposite. But you see, the pride comes in, oh, I'm such a good person. See all I give. I'm such a good person. But it's a secret. Nobody knows. And with the three, it's like I deceive that I really am feeling unworthy. And if I lose a race, if I fail at something, oh, it's devastation. It's devastation. And so, you can see that kind of character is important in a story, isn't it? They may be bragging, but you know that it's just hot air, that they may even be bullying. But what's underneath all of that is really shame, is really the fear of not being loved and not being worthy. And so you see how the Enneagram really is charting not only the character arc, and we're all characters, right? But it's also charting an invitation to heal what feels broken inside of us. And isn't that what stories want to tell? So we move to the four, and the four says, well, the way I'm going to deal with my lack of worth is I'm going to be special. I may be the odd person in the room, but I'm going to be special. And I'm going to do it in any number of ways. Some people weigh 500 pounds. Some people are special because, I don't belong. I don't fit in. There's something always a little missing for me. Some people may So Kathy has a lot of four energy. They call the four the artist. They call the four the tragic romantic.
Oh my God.
And and
It's
and so you have a lot of four, but you have a lot of three, and you have a lot of two. But you see how they're connected. See, you have a three wing. If you are a four, I don't know, and I would never tell anybody what number they are ever. Even my clients, I want them to choose, because you see, we are a hologram. We're all these things, but you see the four. So like this smile on your face, this enthusiasm, and then your style, your art, it's so full of depth and love and uniqueness. And so that is a strategy for a four. But you see, the four has a three, which is getting out there and performing, achieving, and working their butt off. And it also has the two, the giver, there. And they're all connected. It all makes sense. So for me as a two, I had to really develop the four, because I was so, and here I was an actor. You would think that I would have been a four, but I'm not. And it was fine to hide behind a character that I was playing, right? But I needed to get into me. I needed to be develop other art forms, visual art forms, to see myself and claim myself as an artist, because then I had to be with me. And it's hard to be with me. And a two deflects. You say to a two, "How are you?" The two will say, "How are you?" Like they'll turn it around on a dime. So each of these access points helps a character heal and become whole. And if we're doing that with the characters we're developing, we don't want stereotypical two-dimensional characters, right? We want complex characters. And so being aware that, let's say, the character is, so the main character in the novel I'm writing is a four. And, her journey is about accessing other numbers, and finding those. And so I have to embed those in the story. Either she comes to it herself, and in my book, she's working with a therapist, but, or other numbers impact her so much that she has to jump to one of her other numbers. So now we're going to leave, that's the heart types. And we're going to move into the 5, 6, and 7. And those are called the head types. Now, I have to laugh about this because you see, the 4 has a wing of 5. So, Kathy, I want you to listen to the 5, okay? Because you're gonna laugh. So, okay. So the 5, 6, and 7s are called the head types. And they're associated with fear, like the heart types were shame and unworthiness. Their issues are around fear and security. And so they use their head in various ways to strategize around that. Now, I don't like to say, like, all numbers feel shame, right? But not it in a motivational way that you default to that all the time. And of course, all numbers feel fear, but not necessarily in a motivational way that you're defaulting to all the time. So the 5, 6, and 7, they don't want to walk around looking like they're afraid, right? Who wants to do that? They're going to hide that, right? And so how do they strategize, and what are the masks they wear? And how do they meet their motivation, which is to be secure and safe, and to be not so afraid. So it's interesting that when I get to the 6, in a lot of films, the main character is a 6. And they are the underdog. They're the fearful one that you're rooting for to become courageous and brave. and save the day at the end. They have a very compelling character arc. And so in a lot of, you think of, The Hobbit and all of those stories where, looking for Lord of the Rings, looking for the ring. And it's really a fearful person that's looking for the ring, the Hobbit, but goes and finds himself in situations where he's forced to call upon his bravery, just like the heart types are going to want to be forced to call upon their own sense of worth and love, self-love. So the 5 strategizes around it by saying, oh my God, the world is such a big place and I'm such a small person. So I am going to learn about everything. I am going to read and gather information, and I am going to, that is how I will be safe. That is how I will be secure, because I will have this wealth of knowledge. And it might be knowledge in music. My son is a 5 with a strong 4 wing. And from the time he was little, he just collected so much music. I mean, he couldn't get enough music. My father was a 5 with a 4 wing. As an actor, he had every video of every film released on anything. So when he got an audition and they say, oh, you need a Spencer Tracy kind of character, oh, how'd he take his videotapes and he'd watch every Spencer Tracy movie before he went to that audition, and he would nail it, because he gathered all of these resources to himself. And that's what 5s do. They resource themselves through learning, through knowledge, a little bit through hoarding. They don't easily let go of things.
Oh, you're laughing. You're killing me here.
I'm all of these things too. You should see my house. So anyway, but you see why? Because the more resourced I am, the better. And it doesn't always, a character that's a 5 doesn't always have to be resourced in things. They can also be like stingy a little bit about, their time and their energy. And so they'll be very selective about not giving too much of that away. A real 5 will do that. Like my father came up with the line, because he loved the Enneagram, and he used it for everything as an actor. And he came up with the line, and it is on his headstone. He wanted it as one of the things on his headstone. And it is, now is not the time. So when you would say, Dad, could you do this now? Can we meet now? Yes, of course. Now is not the time. And especially things that he found scary or distasteful or uncomfortable to him. Now is not the time. So he wrote on his headstone, this is the best life I've ever had, and now is the time. I'm gone. This was the time. So that's how the 5 strategizes, by being very discerning about how they spend their time, their energy, their resources. It doesn't mean they're stingy people. It means they're afraid to give too much away for whatever reason, right? Now we get to the 6, which is what I said, you will often find them as heroes in movies. So the 6 looks at the world and says, how am I going to get my security? Well, I'm going to question everything. I'm going to be a devil's advocate. And I'm going to worry about everything. And I am going to see the problem in everything. You see, I told you the first book I read was written by a 6. So what this author focused on was the problems with all the types. Well, I'm a 2 and I want to be liked, and I don't want to be focusing on all the problems about myself, at first. So I couldn't resonate with that person's writing. I needed more neutral descriptions. So the 6 goes, well, I'm going to question everything. So even if I really don't exactly doubt what you're saying, I am still going to research it. I'm still going to question it. I'm still going to doubt it. And I'm going to maybe be a little negative about what you're saying, and I'm not going to commit right away to what you're saying. And so you'll see in a story, right, like, you know, decision making for a 6 is so difficult, right? How do you decide when you're doubting everything? Well, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do this, or I could do that. And in doing that, like, I can't move forward because I keep going back and forth between this and that, and I can't move forward. So you can see what an interesting character that is, that the characters in movies that are 6s are stuck trying to decide, right? And they don't know how to move forward. And life forces them to move forward. And, you know, the victory for a 6 and the development for the 6 is when they can listen to their own deep inner voice, their intuition, and they can say, I'm not afraid to follow this because I know that I'm being led. And when I'm being led and I can trust that, I can finally trust that. And for many spiritual people, it's like trusting a connection to the universe that I'm being led. You know, my son is a Taoist. So, you know, trusting that he is being led the way that he needs to be led. And for a fear-based type, that's a really good thing, right? So, but at the end, they, in a great story, that most fearful number on the Enneagram, the most doubting number, frees themselves and finds the courage to do what they've been afraid to do their whole life. You see these stories behind each type. They're so beautiful, aren't they? Like and they're so true because they're consistently motivational. You don't stop. You know, people say, well, don't I outgrow my number? Don't I outgrow that? Nah, you really don't. You kind of grow and develop and have self-awareness about it and can make different choices, but you do default and you aren't usually aware of it. And that's why, like, you know, it even gives you languaging for characters. I have a client who's a artificial intelligence designer, and he just loves the Enneagram. And you know, I've gone in and worked in his company before, you know, with his teams and stuff. And he has developed, is in the process of developing, where you can interview someone and just by their word choice and their languaging, you can know their type. So the kinds of words we use has something to do with being able to even recognize the type. So imagine if we're trying to be impeccable and consistent with a character, there are certain words that they're going to keep defaulting to because that's in their pattern of the way they think, the pattern of the way they feel, the patterns of the way they behave. Now, of course, we want our characters to always have moments of being surprising, right? That's cool. But we don't want to be surprising in a way that is not consistent to their motivation, right? That's weird. So that's really important to remember. So now we go to the 7, and the 7 is always afraid that death is near, that they're not going to get to be able to do and say and live and have the adventures and the tastes of, because life is going to end. And you can look at them and think of them, well, they're the happiest type. They're the most optimistic of all the types. But actually, what's motivating that optimism and then everything's fine kind of attitude is they're hiding their fear. They're hiding their fear of death. They're hiding their fear of missing out on something. And they wear this mask, everything's fine, until life isn't fine. And then life collides with them and kind of forces them to slow down, stop running. You know, in my new book that's coming out in July, My Musings, one of the lines and it's a journal, it's these inspirations. It was Kathy who told me to make it into a book. So it is a book. It's a book already. And it's just going to be released, I hope, in July. But one of the inspirations and journal prompts, because it's a guided journal, is, am I running toward or am I running away? And it seems like the 7 is always running toward something. Always running toward. Well, I have a friend. She's a PhD in psychology, an RN nurse. She's a master tango dancer. She's a master pianist and accordion player. She is a master Tai Chi. She's a 7. And she is like, but the Enneagram actually has transformed her because she knows, what am I doing? I have to slow down and smell the roses. I'm running away from death as I run toward everything. And so you can imagine how poignant it is for a 7 character to realize what they're running from and to find that the greatest adventure of all is in the stillness, is in nature, is in the pause, is in their connection with themselves. There couldn't be a greater adventure than that. Hard to get a character or a person, believe me, working with people every day, to trust that. So now we move to the last 8, 9, and 1, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. And so the 8, 9, and 1 are the power types. Power control. So what's their secret? Well, the emotion, was shame for the heart types and fear for the head types. The heart types moving toward believing they are worthy and that they don't have to prove it in any way. I mean, I remember this story. I was in my 20s and I went to see a psychic, and I was so sad. I had achieved so much and I was so sad. And the psychic channeled this voice of Desi. And Desi, in this weird voice, said to me, Ruthie, what would be enough? What would be enough to prove your worth? And the tears were running down my face. And I said, I don't know. I don't know that there is anything that would do it. And she said, the baby that is born and dies after a few breaths is worth as much as the greatest teacher or greatest artist in the whole world, because the fact that you breathe is your worth. The fact that you're alive. Nothing else has to be proven. And I had a client at the time who had a child with cerebral palsy, and and the child could not feed or talk or walk or do anything. and an angelic child. And I put his picture in my office where I see clients. And I said, this child is worth as much as anyone in the world, even though he can't do anything really for anyone except be in full presence. So that was like really breakthrough for me, because you see, it applies to each of these. It applies how much validation, how many awards do we have to win? And you guys, we're in this world where we're having to self-promote, and this is so hard for me. And I know I have to do it because it's my growth trajectory as a human being, is to not hide, is to it's so hard. But how many awards is enough? And for the 5, 6, and 7, how much money, how much resources would be enough for you to actually feel secure? I remember saying to a client, you got, $1 million. This client had $1 million. And I said, but you're still, chasing after security. Oh, you have to marry a richer man than that. And I said, how much money would be enough for you? And she looked at me and I said, like 10 million? No, in this day and age, 10 million isn't really that much. Well, what about 100 million? Well, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know. And so, but it isn't that different from how much validation is enough. And it's like, it's that it has to come within. So for 5, 6, and 7, it's not external. It's from within. Do I trust myself? Do I find my intuition? Now, when we get to the power control types, very interesting. So they're the body types. They're very physical. They are associated with the emotion of anger, but anger, as I write about in a lot of my books, has many faces. Anger doesn't have to be rage. It can be disappointment. It can be resentment. It can be any number of things. It can be being judgy. It can be, frustrated is another form of anger. So we don't have to get the idea that it's just about raging. So being aware of that with your characters is very important if you choose to write about a power type. So the 8, so what's the secret? The secret is that I am not powerful. The secret is that I have to avoid vulnerability at all costs. No one is going to see that I'm vulnerable. Ever. I won't even see that I'm vulnerable. So the 8, they're very charismatic. They are often politicians. They can be inspiring leaders. Martin Luther King, I'm certain, was an 8. And, 8 has lust that goes along with that. 8 has, they're so alive. They're so hot. But everything is, they walk into a room and they have to be the alpha dog. They have to be. They have to assess who's here and is there any other alpha dogs in the room? Well, I got to out alpha them. And what they're hiding, what's so sad, is they're hiding that they're vulnerable, that they're not God. I one time had a client that was an 8 that said to me, some people say about 8s that we think they're God. I just know I am. And she was serious about it. Now, we all are connected to God, right? Or consciousness or whatever. But I mean, just that puffed up put on this about it. And she actually, had severe addiction problems, and many eights can have severe addiction problems because look what they're running from, and look at how they have to be the all powerful, and nobody is ever going to tell them that they're not in control. So, they're also the protector. So when they're evolved, guess where their arrow goes? It goes to 2. And they become the magnanimous giver. They become the protector. Do you see that my 2 goes to 8? Well, it goes to 8 because I don't want to be a doormat. I've got to own some power, right? And boy, when I became a mother, that came full force because I became a mother lion for my son. I wasn't a doormat for my son. I was a mother lion. I chased a robber and went through a red light that had come to rob our house and pinned him with my car against another car until the police came. Me. Like my clients go, you did that? You're so sweet and calm and nice and mothering and giving. Oh, watch out. And I have that. That's why this is so brilliant. Do you see? Because it gives you your path of self-mastery. It gives you your path of development, which every character, protagonist specifically, but sometimes in our stories, the antagonist grows too. That's when something beautiful really happens in a story. When somehow the antagonist gets changed or transformed. So the 8 is that. I don't need, and you can conjure up lots of people in the world that you might think are an 8 pretty easily, right? And now, and the 8 has no problem. I'm angry, and you're going to know I'm angry, and I don't feel bad about being angry. And, one time I was really angry, and I felt I was really in my 8, and my son, who was about 12, after I'd get angry, then I'd start to cry. Well, 8s don't do that. But the 2 was like going, oh, I lost my temper and I'm so embarrassed and I wasn't a good person. And so my son looked at me and he said, sometimes you act like an 8, but it's just a pseudo 8, he said to me. You're just a pseudo 8. And he was 12 years old. Like, kids get the Enneagram so fast, you can't believe it. They get it so fast. Someday I want to do a beautiful book for children in the Enneagram. But anyway, the 9, so what do they do? You're going to know this right away. And that is, the 9 says, leaning back, I'm not angry, you're angry. I don't get angry, you're angry. And then they proceed to do all kinds of passive aggressive things. So the 8, they call the boss, the challenger, the protector. The 9, they call the harmony maker, the peacemaker. And yeah, when they're in their goodness and in their groundedness, I suppose, they will be that. They can be good mediators, but they have to learn to not be so afraid of conflict that they shut it down, that they deny it, because conflict is part of life. I mean, we couldn't have any stories at all if there was no conflict, right? So it's hard to make a character be a 9 as your protagonist. I'm going to just say that. I mean, imagine how many movies are really about, people that are the main character that are avoiding conflict. It's hard to write. How many movies were made about the Dalai Lama? Not many. And, he'd be an example of a 9, except he is evolved. So, if you read his stuff, he says, anger arises in me. It's just over very quickly. I see it and I let it go. So nines are avoiding conflict. They really are angry. The book I'm working right now on is called Loving the Unlovable, and it's relationships, the shadow of ourselves, and the Enneagram. And so I have images of a nine shaking another nine's hand. And what I'm going to have as an image is behind it in the shadows is somebody really angry and really mad that's hiding that away in a closet, shutting the door, locking that, and, dismissing when other people are angry, dismissing when there's conflict. And the thing about the nines that are really interesting is that they want to be seen, they want to matter, they want to be important, but they hide because they think that they lose their power if they reveal too much about themselves. So they'll shake their head yes to something, but they have no intention of doing what they just agreed to. And then they'll have a good excuse why they didn't come or whatever. But part of that is a power thing around strategizing, avoiding the conflict, but at the same time, being the powerful one in the room. And I'm going to tell you that if you have an 8 and a 9 up against each other as characters, who do you think would win? What did you say, Kathy?
That's a good question, but I would think the 9. I don't.
Absolutely, the 9. Because the 9, I mean, what is that scientific thing? There is nothing as powerful as an immovable boulder.
Yeah.
Like the force of stagnancy or the force of immovability. And so if you've got an 8 and a 9 in a scene, it's so interesting because you would think that the 9, who seems so peaceful and very affable and kind, can absolutely beat the pants off of an 8. Because the 8 is so out there with their obvious need to control, right?
Right.
So then we end with the 1. So the 1 is very dear to my heart, possibly because it's one of my wings. They call the 1 the perfectionist, the reformer. Just noticing, Kathy, that 4 goes to 1 too. So I'm just going to have that out there too, like the dynamicness of how we touch into these things. So imagine, and the songs that I was playing from this guy, Ryan O'Neal, for the 1, so poignant. So imagine that your idea of avoiding vulnerability, which is what the power types do, is that the world has to be perfected, that we have to make it a better place. It has to be a perfect place, but nothing's perfect. And there's that beautiful expression, wabi sabi, Japanese expression. And wabi sabi in the Japanese culture says that, I mean, I remember being told this at 20 years old, my mentor, my teacher, and he said, a work of art in the Japanese culture must have a flaw.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't have a flaw, then it isn't art. So it's called wabi sabi, which means the perfection of imperfection. So when a 1 can embrace that, then they can transform. When they can stop this inner critic, an outer critic that just is relentless. Whether you see it or not, that's what it's doing. And it's doing to avoid vulnerability, right? I'm just going to keep improving you and improving myself. And I see that I see things in right and wrong, black and white. Well, the 1 in their transformational character arc has to learn that gray exists. that there isn't black and white, but they're very interesting characters. Those characters that have a sort of self-righteousness about what is right and what is wrong. And their learning has to be that what they thought was right wasn't necessarily right. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, as far as motivation and masks and behaviors. And so now I'm going to stop the share. Oh, you know what? Before I do, on this page in my website, ruthieenergy.com, it has so much information for the fives in all of us. And so these are actually inner monologues that I recorded. Some of them are my dad, some of them are actors I know, some of them it's me. And it gives the inner monologue, what goes on, like what, James Joyce would call the stream of consciousness, right? It gives the stream of consciousness of these numbers. And then I have all these videos about a little bit about what I talked about, head, heart, body types, and then lots and lots and lots of other material. And as I say on my YouTube channel, I have, close to 60 videos. So I'm going to say goodbye to my little site. It's pretty though, isn't it?
It is beautiful.
Sherry Stout did my website.
Oh, good job.
So she's terrific. All right, I'm back. So I plappled. I said I didn't want to talk at you, and I did. But thank goodness there was a little interactivity. So I please, are there any questions you have? Any things that are interesting to you about what I said?
Ruthie, I have a question for you.
Good.
I think definitely I'm a heart type. And this is very fascinating. It seems to me that 2 goes to 8, but for me, 8 is not a natural place. It's learned behavior because I have to go to 8 in the work that I do in the nonprofit world as a leader. It's not a place I'm comfortable in, but it's a place that I have to go. Am I thinking?
You are thinking beautifully. You are thinking beautifully, my dear. And, in what I've heard, what I've read of your work, and even in just that little short thing you shared on your birthday, is like, you get this already. Like, I'm giving you a kind of map of something you innately kind of know, but this is such a beautiful way to develop yourself and the characters, right? And to just go, like, if I'm stuck in my writing process and I go to the Enneagram, it's like, oh, yeah, I got to put a situation in here that's going to catapult them. Like, I've got a 2 who doesn't like to be an 8. Remember, my son said, oh, Mom, you're just a pseudo 8. It's like we go to that, which is uncomfortable for us. Now, the development of a human being is that I've had to learn to get more comfortable. Because you see, any of these numbers can live in an excess of what they're doing. We want to loosen the grip of that a little bit. It's like in acupuncture, when in Chinese medicine, they will always look at your body and your pulse and all this in terms of balances and imbalances. What is in excess in you and what is deficient in you? So that's how they treat you with acupuncture. They look at excesses and deficiencies and they try to bring it back into balance. And I write about that in Beyond the Book Club too. So in answer to your question is, the universe didn't make a mistake. It puts you in a situation in which, in order to be effective, which a 2, if you are a 2, wants to be very effective, right? And they don't want to help and give and love I don't want to say that word. I'm too sophisticated. In a less than great way. I'll say I was good. You know what I was going to say. So they know that they have to up their ante sometimes. And they have to, like so much of my work has been to embody the 8, which is not comfortable, but to do it to embody the 8 in a very healthy way, to have it be the protector, to have it be strong and not afraid to be visible. Like, I don't know who's out right now in my inner community of all these numbers that are me. I certainly have got my 2 who wants to give this to you and receive back from you just that you're present here listening with me. I know my 5 is here because even though if you follow the arrows, the 2 goes through 8 to 5. Why? Well, because if I need to go to that place beyond my heart, to the 5 that's gathering information, right? So my 5's here because I couldn't be talking like this to you if my 5 wasn't here. And if I hadn't been studying for 25 years, this exquisite model. And so to say to you, sweet Robert, it doesn't make you any less a wonderful, sweet, giving, kind person to be in your 8. You just go into a healthy 8. You don't, we see too much unhealthy 8ness out there right now. And that makes me sad, it makes me sad. But a healthy 8 has a lot of resonance with the 2 because we want to protect people too, right? And we want to lead people and bring out the best in them. So what I would say to you is it's uncomfortable and you got to say, yeah, I got to sit in this discomfort and I've got to be the best 8 I can be when I'm an 8.
Ruthie, let me ask you another question. So I'm at the beginning, from a character development perspective, I'm at the beginning of a new novel, and my protagonist, I believe, is a 2. He's a ghost in existential crisis. More than anything, he wants to know where he came from and he wants to be loved. But he's the only ghost he's ever known. Is it possible for a 2 to become an 8 and do treacherous things to accomplish that love?
Well, I told you I ran after a robber.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
can I tell you another story that goes with that? So my son was in high school. He was walking through the park. My son is a 5 with a 4 wing. He doesn't like to cause problems. He was walking through the park and there was a gang. We live in Chicago. We live in the city and there was a gang there. And he was walking through and this gang started to like, hey, are you one of the whatever Latin Kings or something like that? I don't remember what it was. And my son, who is funny, he said, oh yeah. Now my son is a 5. I mean, he is nothing like anyone that would ever be in a gang. I don't want to put any other labels on it than that. Okay. And he made a joke like he was Seinfeld or something. And he said, oh yeah, I'm from that. And they lopped onto him and they broke his nose. And he comes into the house and he's got blood coming down his nose. And I had broken my shoulder and it was in a sling. And he came in and I said, are you doing an April Fool's joke on me? What is happening? And then he told me. I ran out there into the park with my arm in a sling and I yelled at those kids and what are you doing? He wasn't in a gang. What, this is making you feel powerful? This is making you feel important? Why would you do such a thing? I mean, I could have been killed. But I wasn't going to let them get away with that. You should teach your son not to make jokes at people like us. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. And you should think that power isn't 5 of you jumping on one kid. How about that? So that lives in me. And so, yes, and I love the idea as 2 as a ghost. So the two numbers that could be ghost-like would be the 2, like that invisible, the wind under your wings I was talking about. So the 9 can do that too, but it's for, it is for control. And they do it like, I kind of think they'd be the ones that, like in Harry Potter, puts on an invisible cloak that they can take on and take off. But to make the 2 be sort of a ghost, the 2s are romantics, as are the 4s. And remember, 2 goes to 4. So use that, and there are ghosts that wants to be seen too. There's a particular thing that I do with 2s in my practice, my coaching and therapy practice, and it is where you just sit across from another person and you just look them in the eyes and you see how you want to be seen so badly, but at the same time it's really uncomfortable. It's safer to be the ghost.
Oh my gosh, Ruthie. So that just reminds me. There's this. I watched a documentary, and I cannot remember her name, but she's a renowned performance artist, and she set up in a museum, and people lined up for days.
I know who it is. It's she died recently.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Her ex-lover came to that exhibit to
I
see
actually
her.
was there. Was she at the Met?
Yeah, I feel it was. Yes, she was in New York.
Abra.
She's also famous for counting the individual grains of rice.
Yes, and I saw her and couldn't figure out what was happening. I just happened to be there in New York and saw her sitting in the chair. I know exactly who you're talking about. Okay, go ahead, Robert.
No, so when you were saying that, that just reminded me. And people had such that they didn't know this woman. They sat down. She had, she just looked directly into their eyes, and people had these huge, outpourings of emotion when they had audience, and it was very moving.
Have you ever heard of Amachi? So Ama goes around the world, and she's from India, and she goes around the world and she does something called darshan, where like 18,000 people will come in a day and line up, because Ama means mother, and she will hug you, she will rock you. And you see businessmen lined up. I've seen her 3 times, and she takes your head in her hands and she looks in your eyes, and you feel for the first time you've really been seen.
Wow.
And I remember the tears coming down my face. Not only that she's representing great love and compassion and holding you and holding the little kid in you, right? But that she sees you, like that she sees into you. So I love the concept of this character being a ghost. I love it. Even remember Casper, the friendly ghost?
Oh yeah.
Like, didn't Casper struggle with wanting, like Pinocchio wanting to be a real boy, and the Casper wanting to be really seen? Yeah. That was such a beautiful question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruthie.
So does anybody else curious? We have like maybe 15 minutes.
I have a question. Okay, so this is all fascinating to me, and I can see myself in parts of all these numbers. But
yes.
Where does, to me, the top of the spectrum with the 8, 9s, and 1s, would that be narcissist? Could you put that as a behavior in that type of a?
No,
not.
And the reason I wouldn't do that is because the 4s can be very self-centered. The 7s can be, the 7s who are running after adventure and everything, Oh, I'm sorry I'm late, but I did 6 other things before I got here and I didn't mean to, but that feels narcissistic, doesn't it? And that's coming out of fear. I think that the 9 and the 1 would not ever consider themselves that. You see, here's the thing and that's such a great question because this will help with character development too. So there's a wonderful book called The Wisdom of the Enneagram, and it was the first real book that I could dive into.
Okay.
And it's by Russ Hudson and Don Riso. And Don Riso has passed on. He was a 4 and Russ Hudson is a 5. And a wonderful teacher. But in the book, under each type, they have 9 levels from very unhealthy to very healthy. I would say from very underdeveloped to very developed.
Okay.
And those 9 levels at the bottom fall into DSM codes, which means diagnostic mental illness codes. So you see where these numbers disintegrate to. They completely will disintegrate. So some of them will disintegrate into narcissism. You could imagine that the fearful 6 could disintegrate into paranoia, right? So having worked with all kinds of people of all kinds of numbers, you can have a narcissist. You can have a narcissistic 2, which is always really hard for me to deal with because I don't want to see that in myself. It was like so the book I'm working on with the shadow is like, well, so for a 2, what's my shadow? What do I lock away is selfishness. I'm not allowed to be selfish. So I project selfishness. That person's a narcissist. That person's selfish.
Oh.
And so the shadow means that which I hide away and disown in myself. That's what the book I'm working on now is. And so, when I'll get a 2 that is a real full-blown narcissist, it is like, oh no, like I have to look at myself and go, yep, that can exist in you too.
But they always say, though, that if you can say you're a narcissist, you really aren't.
Well, if you can say you're a narcissist, then you have developed to a degree of being able to recognize it. But it doesn't mean you're still not a narcissist. But do you follow me on that, Kathy?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. And the other end of the spectrum is, I've always read all these things about empaths, people who,
yes,
when I've had a lot of stress this week because of some family and friends' health. And I have found myself just almost to the point of devastation on dealing with what other people are going through. So I paint. That's the only way I can get out of that.
absolutely. And I want to say to you, generally speaking, all 3 of the heart types are empaths. And they are because it's very hard for them to differentiate. Like, even though I've got, like, saying about the 3, the performer achiever, which, doesn't appear, as vulnerable, let's say, as a 2 and a 4 might, okay? But they're still a heart type. And they have hard times, because they're always trying to please people and prove themselves, So it's very hard to differentiate and individuate for heart types, generally speaking. We over empathize. That can be true for other numbers too. But what I wanted to say about this, and this might kind of blow it out of the water, and that is, when we're an empath, and we're not differentiating. We're not letting that other person be on their journey. We're internalizing their journey. In a way, we're stealing their journey. A chapter I just wrote in the new book is called What is We? There's you and I, but what, becoming a we is pretty hard won in a healthy way.
Huh.
Because I think we tend to we a lot, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
But have we earned that right to we?
I can see how this could really be big help in character development because, and I like the thought of going from the low end of the spectrum to the evolved end of the spectrum.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Look at that book, Yes, I've written books on the Enneagram, but The Wisdom of the Enneagram really is phenomenal. And it will show you that. It will chart that. So you want your character to kind of begin, obviously, at the beginning of their journey, maybe not all in the mental illness area of it, but certainly, let's say, just in the average area of the character. So Eileen, yes, I want to hear from you.
Well, I wanted to talk about character development too. Like this, when I've learned in the past that before, when you're writing your characters, writing your story, you really want to know who that person is in every way. You want to know things that are not going to appear on the page. And so when I wrote my first book, I developed the characters and then as I wrote it, I learned more about them. So now I'm working on a new piece, a new project, a new book. And I'm wondering, I haven't done that with these characters. I'm finding out who they are as I'm writing them. I'm not sure that's a good idea or not, but I'm developing them. I know the main ones, but I'm developing them. I really like this, I feel like I want to go look at this model and know the opposite sides to maybe develop a person more, a character more. Is what would you recommend in that?
Well, first of all, I do want to say, as having been an actor and an acting teacher forever, the acting teacher part, I still am. So, that's the same thing that we teach actors. When the character gets up in the morning, what's their morning ritual? What are the things they keep in their pockets? What are the smells they like? Going through all the senses for that character so that you can embody that character. How do they walk? How do their feet meet the ground? What do they see when they are looking, and walking? Do they see the world around them? Do they see the whole forest, or they just hone in on a tree? How do they like to wear their hair? All those things. As an actor, you must begin by knowing that. So I think that it would be fun exercise to do, to take the characters that you've begun writing, and they are revealing themselves to you, absolutely. But like my books, like my guided journals and stuff, my acting lessons for living guided journal, thank you, Kathy, one of the bonus picks. It is a cool book for you to maybe go in and say, I'm going to go into this journal, but I'm going to go in as my character that I'm writing.
That's cool.
And I'm going to look at, all these things that Ruthie's asking me to look at in myself. Well, I'm not going to do that. I can do this for each of the characters. How do they relate to their family? Blah, 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 blah. Those are all in the guided journal. And it's coming from an actor's point of view, but it's used for writers all the time in the workshops I've done with writers, and when I do one-on-one coaching, those are the questions. So what I would say is, don't get locked in. Trust your intuition, but I know for me, when I am writing and working, I have to ritualize it. I have to open the portals. I have to, even before I did this morning, I rang my bell in all the directions, kind of open the portal to support me in this experience. So I do that when I sit down to write too. So what I hope that some of my books are doing for people is, yeah, you be led. Let the universe download it to you. And there are ways to open the portal through a question. And that's what I'm doing, what I do in the guided journal. So um, I would in acting lessons for living, not the guided journal, the one that came before it, the companion book, there's lots of those exercises throughout that book too. And instead of going, oh, I'm reading this for me, Eileen, because Eileen's developed the way Eileen's developed into a wonderful person, I might add. And I would say, let your characters go on that journey with you.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's
Great
interesting.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does anybody else, before we wind up, have any questions?
I was going to ask you briefly, Ruthie. First of all, thank you so much. It was really interesting stuff. I took a ton of notes. Um, I see some connections with Carl Jung's archetypes, and I was wondering if you'd ever explicitly made that connection.
Oh, it's done all the time. So, I studied Jung and all that stuff. And yeah, you can, well, when I say that it dates back to, ancient Egypt, well, where did archetypes grow? Well, that's how it dates back. It dates back to that the ancient Egyptians had 9 gods. Each of these gods have the archetypal predispositions of these numbers. So yeah, if you're into archetypes of any kind, mythology, and you use that in your writing, it's just another language.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is so helpful because archetypes are symbols. There's a symbology to them. The Enneagram is dynamic, and it shows the patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving, which an archetype doesn't.
It definitely feels deeper.
Yeah, but it's right there with it. It's right there with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot, for me, there were some gray edges as the different types were, as you described the different types. Like I was thinking about 3, and actually you described this, how it could be a heart type. So you started talking about that. That was helpful because it felt to me not so much like a heart type when you first described it.
Well, yes, see, because if you look at each of the numbers, there's a counter type. So the 2, 3, and 4, when 3s are wonderful people, please, they are, but they bury their hearts so deep down that they don't even know sometimes what they're feeling because they're so busy proving, right? But it's so tender to even say that and talk about it. Now, if you go to the fear-based types, the 7 is the counter type because you wouldn't think they're afraid at all. Oh man, they're climbing mountains, they're adventuring, but it's underneath. It's the subtext, right? And so if you go to the power types, the counter type is the 9 because they're saying, I'm not angry, and they seem very peaceful, but what they're doing is actually appearing peaceful. That's the mask, right? But underneath it, there is anger. It's hidden. And so one of the things with archetypes, there's been books even about the Enneagram and archetypes. But archetypes are telling a story that we're supposed to get something from that, right? In a way. And so they're phenomenal to use, but they don't get into the deeper psychological pieces. That's my point.
As you were describing, that's the part I was getting is there's this one surface, the way you show up, and that's where there's some commonality. Like I see the 3, achieving, and the 1 is a perfectionist and trying to So there seems some surface commonality, but underneath it's the motivation.
And I wanted to say
where-
something that's so right, because there are, when you said gray edges, so there are what we call lookalike numbers, that when people first take a test, they will come up with a couple different numbers initially. And it's because the strategies they use to get what they want are the same strategies or similar strategies, but the motivation is different. So a 6 can be a very helpful person, but they're doing it for security, where the 2 is doing it for worth. So that was a beautiful question and right on. So I think I have to wind up, I don't know, because I have clients, but you guys, thank you so much for letting me share what I'm passionate about. So wonderful.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Thank you, Ruthie. That was great.
One last
Happy
question.
teacher.
This ring, is it labradorite? Because I saw it black through the first part of your thing, and now it's going to aqua.
Yeah, it's labradorite.
I knew it. Okay, that's beautiful.
And can I just say something when you were talking about empaths? This is the stone every empath should, I wear it every day.
I have several. Yeah.
I have so many different jewelry, all kinds of jewelry. But when I am feeling like, uh-oh, I need a filtration stone, I need something to help me differentiate a little bit. Whoop, there it is.
It's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm so glad. And is this going to be recorded so I can share it?
It is recorded. As soon as I end this, I will download it, put it up on my YouTube channel, and I can send it to you if you want to put it up on your YouTube channel.
I'd rather share it from your YouTube channel so it brings it back to you.
Well, it should be up pretty quickly, and I'll post that on all social media. What's great about it, you guys, is this is the kind of thing that I find that when you listen to it again, you'll garner more information, because we're trying to take it all in.
I know.
Even from the first time you did this for our online book club meeting, which was amazing, now I have a better perception. Now I've got, these books to read. I've made notes. And if you have any questions, the best way to get a hold of you, Ruthie,
is just go to my website, ruthieenergy.com, RUTHIENERGY. So there's not 2 E's in the middle. It's just RUTHI and then the word energy.com. And then there's a place, contact me. I think meet Ruthie and contact me, and it'll get right to me right away.
I'll be sure and put your website too when I post this on my YouTube channel so people can go to it. But thank you. Wow. No. I hope everybody has a good Saturday. I thank you so much. And don't forget, tonight, Robert Waltney and I are doing our book club. And it's pretty in pink.
I know. I wore pink in honor of that, by the way.
Yeah. So if you all want to come to it, just email me or let me know now, and I'll send you the link to it, because we're going to.
I'm planning on coming. 6:30, right? 6:30.
6:30 Central Standard Time, and
I'm already dressed.
You're already dressed, so you look great. And thank you all for joining us. Spread the news. Subscribe to the Kathy L. Murphy channel, and subscribe to Ruthie's too. If any of you have a YouTube channel, tell me and I'll subscribe. It's all about sharing our stories, and it's all about helping us mentor it to each other so we can better our stories. So thank you. Have a wonderful Saturday, everybody. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you tonight at 6:30. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.